Ethan Carter leaned back in his luxurious leather chair, his fingers lightly tracing the edges of a framed photograph that sat prominently on his expansive mahogany desk. The image, slightly faded but still vibrant, captured a moment from his childhood. A younger him with a gap-toothed smile, perched on the knee of a woman whose eyes sparkled with laughter. Margaret Carter, his mother, had once been a beacon of creativity and warmth, a celebrated artist whose talent was as undeniable as her struggles. But now, as he sat in the heart of his opulent office overlooking the sprawling Los Angeles skyline, the memory felt more like a ghost haunting him. The walls of his office were adorned with accolades, plaque after plaque signifying his success as a tech entrepreneur. He had built a fortune from the ground up, transforming innovative ideas into tangible wealth. Yet, the more he achieved, the more he felt a void growing inside him, one that could only be traced back to the woman in the photograph. The void was not merely the absence of her presence in his life. It was the weight of unresolved anger and pain that festered with every passing day. "Why did you have to ruin everything?" he muttered to himself, the words dripping with frustration. He clenched the frame tighter, feeling the cool glass press into his palm, a reminder of the time that had slipped through his fingers. He could still hear the echoes of her laughter, but now they were drowned out by memories of her descent into addiction. A slow spiral that had turned their once loving home into a battleground of broken promises and shattered dreams. Ethan's phone buzzed on the desk, jolting him from his reverie. He glanced at the screen and saw a message from his assistant, reminding him of the impending family meeting with Margaret. The term family meeting felt like a cruel joke. In truth, it was more like a confrontation, a reckoning he had avoided for years. But today that avoidance would end. He had made up his mind. It was time to face the woman who had hurt him, but also the woman who had given him life. As he prepared for the meeting, the weight of his decision settled heavily on his shoulders. He envisioned the conversation, the accusations he would hurl at her, the anger that would spill forth like a dam breaking. He felt justified. After all, she had made choices that had irrevocably altered the course of his life. He could hear her voice in his head, the feeble excuses she would offer, the empty promises of change. But this time, he wouldn't allow himself to be swayed. Tough love, he reminded himself. That was the only way. Meanwhile, in a stark contrast to Ethan's world, Margaret Carter sat in a dimly lit room in a dilapidated boarding house on the outskirts of Los Angeles. The peeling wallpaper and flickering light bulb reflected her current state, broken and struggling. Once a celebrated artist known for her vibrant canvases, her life had become a shadow of its former self, dominated by addiction and loneliness. She clutched her paintbrush like a lifeline, but the colors on her palette had dulled, mirroring the emptiness she felt inside. Margaret's phone rang, cutting through the silence. The ringtone was unfamiliar, but something compelled her to answer. "Hello," she said tentatively, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mom, it's Ethan," came the voice from the other end, firm and authoritative. Her heart raced, a mixture of hope and dread filling her chest. "Ethan, I wasn't expecting to hear from you." "We need to talk," he said bluntly. "I'm inviting you to my place for a family meeting. Can you make it?" A family meeting. The term weighed heavily on her. There had been too many of those in the past, too many discussions that had ended in tears and anger. "Is this about my art?" she asked, trying to gauge his tone. "Have you seen my recent work?" "It's not about your art, Mom," he replied, frustration creeping into his voice. "It's about everything else. Just be there at 7. The call ended abruptly, leaving Margaret staring at her phone, a mix of emotions swirling within her. She had longed for reconciliation, yet the thought of facing Ethan filled her with anxiety. What would he say? Would he blame her for everything that had gone wrong? The ghosts of their shared past loomed large, threatening to consume her. As the sun began to set, casting a golden hue over the city, Margaret prepared herself for the meeting. She dressed carefully, choosing an old but beautiful dress that had once made her feel vibrant and alive. It was a small act of defiance against the darkness that had overtaken her life. She wanted to be seen, to show Ethan that she was still the woman he remembered, despite the scars she bore. When she arrived at Ethan's mansion, the sheer opulence left her momentarily speechless. The sprawling estate stood as a monument to his success, a stark reminder of everything she had lost. The grand entrance was flanked by manicured hedges and a fountain that glimmered in the fading light. Yet, as she stepped inside, the warmth of the home was overshadowed by an icy tension that hung in the air. "Ethan," she called out, her voice trembling slightly. He appeared moments later, his expression a mix of determination and resentment. "You made it," he said, but the words felt hollow. They stood in the grand foyer, and for a brief moment, neither knew what to say. The silence was deafening, filled with all the unspoken words of their tumultuous history. "Let's just get this over with," he finally said, leading her to the dining room where a lavish dinner awaited. The table was set with fine china and crystal glasses that sparkled like diamonds, but Margaret felt out of place amidst the luxury. As they sat down, Ethan wasted no time. "You know why we're here, right?" he started, his voice steady but laced with anger. "You've ruined my childhood, Mom. Your choices have haunted me for years." Margaret flinched at his words. "Ethan, No excuses," he interrupted sharply. "You say you're trying to get better, but I don't see it. You've had so many chances." "Chances?" Margaret's voice rose, her pain surfacing. "You think I wanted this? You think I chose this life? I was an artist, Ethan. I had dreams. And then you threw it all away for drugs," he shot back, slamming his hand on the table, rattling the silverware. "You think I wanted to grow up in a broken home? Do you have any idea how it felt to see you like that?" The air crackled with tension as they exchanged barbs, each word a dagger aimed at the other's heart. The argument escalated, voices rising in a cacophony of anger and hurt. "Maybe if you had been there for me instead of drowning in your addiction, I wouldn't be the person I am today," Ethan shouted, his face flushed with rage. Margaret's eyes filled with tears, but she refused to let them fall. "I did my best, Ethan. I was struggling. You don't understand the demons I fought." "Demons?" he scoffed, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "You made your choices. You chose the bottle over your son." In that moment, something inside Margaret snapped. Fueled by years of pain and frustration, she stood up, her chair scraping harshly against the floor. "You don't get to blame me for your life. I'm not the villain in your story. Enjoy the streets, Mom," he spat, his words sharp as glass. With that, Margaret turned on her heel, tears streaming down her face as she stormed out of the mansion. The grand doors slammed behind her, echoing in the silence that followed. Outside, the sprawling wealth of Ethan's life felt like a distant dream. She stepped into the cool night air, her heart racing. Their confrontation had been brutal, but it had also awakened something inside her, a flicker of defiance amid despair. As she walked away from the mansion, the city loomed before her, both terrifying and liberating. Little did she know that this confrontation would set off a chain of events that would change both their lives forever. Margaret stumbled through the streets of Los Angeles, the bitter chill of the evening air biting at her skin. Shadows danced under the flickering streetlights, and the once familiar landscape of her city now felt alien and daunting. Her heart raced as she tried to find her bearings, each step echoing with uncertainty. The weight of her estrangement from Ethan pressed heavily on her chest, a reminder of the confrontation that had shattered any semblance of hope she had held onto. Just as despair began to seep into her bones, a voice broke through the haze. "Hey there, you look like you could use a warm meal." Turning, Margaret saw a man sitting on the curb, his beard tangled and gray, eyes bright despite the weariness etched on his face. Jake, as he introduced himself, was a kind-hearted soul who had spent years navigating the harsh realities of life on the streets. He offered her a half-eaten sandwich and a bottle of water, his generosity stark against the backdrop of her recent turmoil. "Thank you, I'm not really hungry," she replied, hesitating as her eyes flickered between the food and the man's earnest gaze. "Trust me, it's better than it looks," Jake chuckled, taking a bite from his own sandwich. "We've all got our stories, you know." I learned a long time ago that sharing food makes it taste better. Margaret sat beside him, her defenses slowly crumbling as she accepted the sandwich. The taste was bland, but it filled a void she hadn't realized was there. I'm not really used to this, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I had a nice home. Once is a powerful word, Jake replied, nodding knowingly. But it doesn't have to be the end of the story. You gotta keep writing it, you know? What's your name? Margaret, she said, the name feeling foreign on her lips after so much time spent in the shadows. I used to paint. Art was my life. Used to, Jake prompted, his tone gentle yet probing. What happened? She paused, grappling with the memories that flooded her mind. I lost everything. My son, my art, myself. The words escaped her, heavy with the weight of her regrets. I pushed him away when I needed him the most. Maybe he pushed you away too, Jake suggested, his eyes holding a softness that made her feel seen. Sometimes it's not just one person's fault. But you're here now, and that counts for something. As they exchanged stories, Margaret felt a connection with Jake. He told her about his own struggles, the family he had lost, and how he had learned to find solace in the little things. A sunset, a warm cup of coffee, the laughter of children playing in the park. With each shared experience, Margaret began to feel a flicker of hope. Perhaps she wasn't as broken as she had thought. After finishing their makeshift meal, Jake offered her a place to sleep for the night. An abandoned building nearby, a refuge he had discovered weeks earlier. It's not much, but it's safe, he assured her. And it beats sleeping in the alley. Margaret hesitated, the notion of accepting help feeling foreign after years of independence. But the thought of spending another night alone in the streets filled her with dread. With a nod, she followed Jake, her heart racing with a mix of fear and anticipation. As they entered the building, Margaret felt a wave of relief wash over her. The air was stale, but it was sheltered from the biting wind outside. Jake rummaged through his belongings, pulling out an old blanket and handing it to her. Here, this should keep you warm, he said with a smile. Thank you, Jake, she replied, her voice trembling. I didn't think anyone could be so kind. Kindness is all we've got sometimes, he said, settling down on a makeshift bed of cardboard. But it's worth more than gold. You'll see. The night passed slowly, the sounds of the city muffled by the walls that surrounded them. Margaret lay on the cold floor, wrapped in the blanket, staring at the ceiling. She thought about Ethan, his anger, his pain, and the love that had turned into resentment. She felt an ache in her heart, but it was accompanied by a newfound resolve. She would not be defined by her past. She would reclaim her life. Meanwhile, across town, Ethan sat alone in his expansive office, the weight of his decisions pressing down on him like a shroud. The walls that once felt comforting now felt claustrophobic, the empty spaces echoing with the ghosts of his actions. His business partners had begun to express their concerns, their whispers of discontent growing louder. He had become a liability, consumed by emotions that clouded his judgment. Ethan, we need to talk, his business partner, Mark, said, stepping into the office without knocking. His expression was grave, a stark contrast to the usual camaraderie they shared. What is it? Ethan replied, attempting to mask the turmoil brewing within. We're losing clients, and it's affecting our bottom line. You've been distracted, and it's showing. Are you okay? Mark's tone was laced with concern, but Ethan felt the sting of accusation. I'm fine, Ethan snapped, his voice harsher than intended. Just give me some time. I'm dealing with family issues. Family issues? You threw your mother out. Do you think that's going to help anything? Mark challenged, crossing his arms. You need to get your head back in the game. We can't afford to lose any more clients. Ethan clenched his jaw, frustration boiling beneath the surface. I said I'm fine, he retorted. Just give me some space. Mark sighed, shaking his head as he left the office. Alone once more, Ethan felt the walls closing in. He picked up his phone, scrolling through messages, hoping for a distraction. But the only notifications that caught his eye were anonymous messages about Margaret's whereabouts. places she had been spotted, people she was rumored to be with. Each message twisted the knife of guilt deeper into his heart. "Why am I doing this?" he muttered to himself, anguish creeping into his voice. He glanced out the window, the city lights twinkling like distant stars. Somewhere out there, his mother was struggling to survive, and he had cast her aside in a moment of anger. The thought gnawed at him, a relentless reminder of his failures. Back in the abandoned building, Margaret awoke to the sound of Jake stirring. Sunlight filtered through the broken windows, illuminating the space in a gentle glow. She sat up, stretching her limbs, and felt a sense of determination wash over her. The night hadn't been easy, but it had ignited a spark within her that she thought long extinguished. "Good morning, Margaret," Jake greeted, his voice warm and inviting. "Ready to face the day?" "I think so," she replied, a smile creeping onto her face. "I want to try something new today." Jake raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Like what?" "I'm gonna find a support group. I need to talk to people who understand what I'm going through," she said, her voice gaining strength. "I want to take control of my life again." "Now that's the spirit," Jake exclaimed, his enthusiasm infectious. "There's a place a few blocks away. They meet in the community center. I can show you if you'd like." Margaret nodded, her heart racing with anticipation. She felt a flicker of hope, a feeling she hadn't allowed herself in years. With newfound purpose, she stood up, ready to embrace whatever challenges lay ahead. The journey wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long time, she felt ready to reclaim her narrative. Margaret stood in the park, her fingers stained with vibrant colors, the sunlight filtering through the trees and casting dappled shadows on the ground. She was lost in the rhythm of her brush strokes, painting a mural that spoke of resilience and hope. The colors danced on the canvas, swirling together to form a phoenix rising from ashes, an embodiment of her journey thus far. Around her, a small group of friends from the support group cheered her on, their laughter blending with the sounds of the park. "Margaret, that's absolutely stunning," Claire, a fellow artist and member of the group, exclaimed, her eyes wide with admiration. "You've captured something truly special here." Margaret smiled, a warmth spreading through her chest. "Thank you, Claire. I wanted to show that even from darkness we can rise. It's a reminder of who we can become." Just then, as she stepped back to get a better view of her work, she felt a shiver run down her spine. There, standing at the edge of the park, was Ethan. He was cloaked in a tailored suit, an image of success and privilege, yet the tension in his jawline betrayed a storm brewing within. Margaret's heart raced. She hadn't expected to see him here, not after the way things had ended between them. Ethan watched her from a distance, his breath caught in his throat. He hadn't prepared himself for the sight of her transformed. The vibrant colors she painted with seemed to reflect a new life, a life he had tried to deny her. As he took a step closer, he noticed the way she laughed with her friends, the ease in her movements, the confidence in her posture. This was not the broken woman he had cast aside. This was someone who had begun to reclaim her narrative. "Margaret," Ethan finally called out, his voice shaky yet resolute, breaking the bubble of merriment that surrounded her. The moment hung in the air, heavy with unspoken words. Margaret turned, her eyes locking onto his. The warmth of the sun felt distant now, replaced by a chill that seeped into her bones. "Ethan," she replied, her voice steady, though her heart raced. "What are you doing here?" "I came to find you," he admitted, stepping closer, his gaze flickering between her and the mural. "I didn't know you'd found this." He gestured vaguely at the scene she was creating, the colors vibrant against the gray backdrop of the city. "Why did you come?" she asked, crossing her arms. "To gloat? To check on your investment? Or to make sure I'm still on the streets where you left me?" "No." Ethan's voice rose, but he quickly tempered it, the anger melting into desperation. "I came because I realized how wrong I was. I thought I was helping you by forcing you to face the consequences. But I see now that I was just pushing you away." Margaret scoffed, shaking her head. "You think saying sorry is enough? You don't get to waltz back into my life and pretend everything is fine." You don't know what I've been through since you kicked me out. I know I hurt you, he said softly, his eyes pleading. I've been wrestling with guilt ever since that night. I hired a private investigator to find you because I needed to understand. I thought maybe we could start over. Start over. She laughed bitterly, the sound echoing through the park. You think you can just erase the past? You think I want to go back to you after everything? Ethan's face fell, the weight of her words crashing down on him. I know I can't undo the pain I caused, but I've been thinking about how to make things right. I want to help you, Margaret. I want to be part of your life again. If you'll let me. Help me, she said, her voice low and fierce. You don't even know who I am anymore. You threw me out like I was nothing. You thought tough love would fix everything. But it didn't. It sent me spiraling down. I'm not that woman you left behind. I see that, he whispered, his gaze sincere. I see how strong you've become. I'm proud of you. I just want a chance to show you I can be better. Margaret felt a flicker of something inside her. A spark of the hope she had slowly been nurturing. But it was quickly extinguished by the memories of her past, the hurt that ran deep. You don't get to take credit for my strength, Ethan. This is my journey, not yours. I know, he conceded, his voice earnest. I wish I had supported you instead of abandoning you. I thought I was doing the right thing. I see now that I was selfish. Selfish doesn't even begin to cover it. She shot back, her anger flaring. You thought you could just dictate my life and then walk away when things got tough. You don't get to come back and act like you care. Not after throwing me away. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, frustration mingling with regret. What can I do to prove it to you? I can't change what happened, but I want to understand and support you now. Margaret stepped closer, the distance between them shrinking. You want to support me? Then stay away. Let me live my life without your shadow looming over me. I'm building something here, and I won't let you tear it down again. His expression was one of deep sorrow, the weight of her rejection heavy on his heart. I won't try to control you. Promise. I just want to be there if you need me. I can't stand the thought of losing you again. You already lost me, she said firmly, her voice steady yet laced with pain. You need to understand that. I'm not the same woman who begged you to stay. I found my place here, and I'm not looking back. Ethan's heart sank as he listened to her words, realizing the profound truth in them. He had indeed lost her, and the realization hit him harder than any physical blow. I just wanted you to know I care. I thought I was doing what was best for you. Yeah, well, your version of best nearly destroyed me, she replied, her voice softer now as she fought to keep her composure. I need to keep moving forward. This is my chance to heal. Then let me help you heal, he said, desperation creeping into his tone. I can support you, not control you. Just allow me to be your ally. Margaret shook her head, her gut twisting at the thought. I can't trust you yet. You need to earn that. Right now, I need to focus on myself and not be reminded of the past. I've worked too hard to get to this point. With that, she turned her back on him, returning to her mural. The colors called to her, a reminder of the new life she was forging. Ethan stood there for a moment, watching her, feeling the painful gulf between them widen. He opened his mouth to say something more, but the words failed him. Goodbye, Ethan, she said without looking back. Ethan's shoulders slumped as he turned away, the weight of her rejection heavy. He walked back toward his car, each step echoing in the silence, a stark reminder of the chasm that now lay between them. As he left the park, he knew he had a long road ahead if he ever hoped to find a way back into his mother's life. But for now, he understood that he had to let her go, to let her find her own way, even if it meant he was left behind. Margaret stood in the small, sunlit room of the art gallery, surrounded by canvases that whispered stories of her past and dreams that had once felt so far away. The gallery, a quaint yet vibrant space, was nestled in a revitalized neighborhood, filled with the laughter of children and the warmth of community. It was a stark contrast to the coldness she had felt in Ethan's mansion, where opulence felt more like a prison than a home. Here, among the bright hues of paint and the smell of turpentine, She had found a sense of belonging. As she dabbed her brush into a palette of cerulean blue, she couldn't help but smile at the sight of her work coming to life on the canvas. It was a mural depicting a sprawling tree, its branches reaching out like open arms. Each stroke was deliberate, a reflection of her journey. A journey of falling and rising, of losing herself and finding her way back. The mural was more than art. It was a testament to her resilience. Margaret called out a voice, breaking her concentration. It was Lisa, one of her new friends from the support group, who had become like family in the time they spent together. "You have to see this. They're hanging the new pieces in the main gallery." Margaret's heart raced with excitement. The main gallery was where the most prominent artists displayed their work, and she had never imagined her creations would occupy such a revered space. "I'll be right there," she shouted back, setting her brush down and wiping her hands on her paint-splattered apron. As she walked into the main gallery, her breath caught in her throat. There, among the other pieces, was her mural, vibrant and alive, drawing the attention of the crowd. She could see people stopping, pointing, and whispering among themselves, their eyes sparkling with appreciation. "Isn't it stunning?" Lisa said, standing beside her. "You've really captured something special here." Margaret felt a warmth bloom in her chest. "Thank you, Lisa. It means so much to me that you're here. Of course, I wouldn't miss it for the world. You're going to shine tonight." Lisa's enthusiasm was contagious, and Margaret felt her own excitement building. As the evening wore on, the space filled with an eclectic mix of art enthusiasts, critics, and locals, all eager to experience the talent on display. Margaret mingled, her heart swelling with pride as people complimented her work. "This is incredible," one woman said, her eyes gleaming. "You have a gift." For the first time in years, Margaret felt seen, not just as Ethan's mother, but as an artist in her own right. Meanwhile, Ethan was wrestling with a different kind of turmoil. In the days following his confrontation with Margaret, he had faced a storm at work. A scandal had erupted, stemming from questionable business practices that had gone unnoticed for too long. The media had taken hold of the story, and his once flourishing company was now facing a public relations nightmare. Ethan paced his office, the walls adorned with accolades and awards that felt hollow now. His phone buzzed incessantly with alerts and messages, but all he could focus on was the gnawing regret that consumed him. He had pushed his mother away, a decision that now felt like a monumental mistake. "Ethan, we need to address the press," his assistant, Sarah, said, entering the room. Her expression was serious, and he could see the concern etched on her face. "They're calling for a statement, and the board is getting anxious." "Give me a minute, Sarah," he replied, running a hand through his hair in frustration. I can't deal with this right now. Sir, you need to pull yourself together. This isn't just about you anymore. It's affecting the entire company," she pressed gently. He nodded, though he felt far from ready. The thought of facing the press made his stomach churn. He was supposed to be the confident leader, the man in control, but all he felt was the weight of his choices pressing down on him. "Fine, I'll make a statement," he finally conceded, his voice lacking conviction. "But first, I need to find my mother." Later that night, as the gallery opening continued, Margaret stood before her mural, a few spectators admiring it closely, discussing the meanings behind her brushstrokes. She listened in, her heart swelling with joy at the interpretations they offered. The conversations reminded her of the warmth she had felt when painting, the sense of clarity that had washed over her in the depths of her struggles. "Margaret," a voice called, and she turned to see Jake, the kind homeless man she had met on the streets weeks ago. He was grinning widely, a huge bouquet of wildflowers in his hands. "I brought these for you. They're beautiful, just like your art." "Oh, Jake," she gasped, touched by the gesture. "You didn't have to do that. I wanted to. You've come so far, and I'm proud of you," he said, his eyes shining with sincerity. She accepted the flowers, inhaling their sweet fragrance, feeling a rush of gratitude. "Thank you for believing in me. I don't think I would be here without your encouragement." He waved a hand dismissively. "You did the work, Margaret. You've got this fiery spirit, and it shows." You deserve every bit of this recognition." Just then, Margaret's heart skipped a beat as she spotted Ethan walking into the gallery. He looked different, haggard, with shadows under his eyes, a stark contrast to the composed man she remembered. Their eyes locked, and for a moment, the bustling gallery faded into the background. She felt a surge of emotions: anger, confusion, and a lingering love that refused to be extinguished. He approached her, his expression a mix of determination and vulnerability. "Margaret," he began, his voice low and earnest. "I've been trying to reach you." She straightened, her heart racing. "What do you want, Ethan? After everything, I know I messed up. I was wrong to kick you out. I thought tough love would help, but it only pushed you away." He interrupted, the urgency in his tone palpable. "I'm sorry." Margaret felt the weight of his words pressing down on her. "You don't get to just apologize and expect everything to be okay. You've hurt me, and it's not that simple." He nodded, his gaze unwavering. "I know, but things are falling apart for me too. My company is in trouble, and I realize now that I need you in my life. I want to make amends." She laughed bitterly, the sound surprising even herself. "You think I'm just going to drop everything because you're having a rough time? I've fought too hard to find my way back to myself." Ethan stepped closer, desperation in his eyes. "I understand that now. I want to support you. I want to be part of your life again. Please." Margaret looked away, her heart torn. Here was the man who had once been her son, now a stranger seeking her forgiveness. "I can't promise anything, Ethan. I need to focus on myself right now. Then let me help you. Let me be part of this journey," he pleaded. As she glanced at her mural, a reflection of her rebirth, Margaret felt the tension of their shared past weighing heavily on her. She knew he had his struggles, but the scars he had left on her soul were still fresh. "I'll think about it," she finally replied, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside her. "But you need to figure out your own life first. I can't be your safety net anymore." Ethan's face fell, but he nodded in understanding. "Fair enough. Just know that I'm here, Margaret. I want to support you however you need me to." With that, he stepped back, giving her space, and in that moment, she recognized the truth in his words. They were both on separate paths, but perhaps one day those paths could converge again. As she turned back to her mural, the colors seemed brighter than ever, a reminder of the strength she had found in herself. In the heart of the gallery, surrounded by the warmth of newfound connections and the echoes of her past, Margaret felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps redemption was possible, not just for Ethan, but for both of them. The night was still young, and the future was unwritten. The night of the gallery opening was a crisp, clear evening in Los Angeles, and the air was filled with an electric anticipation. Ethan Carter stood outside the venue, his heart racing. He had heard through the grapevine about his mother Margaret's recent success, and despite their tumultuous history, he felt an undeniable pull to be there. He straightened his tailored jacket, took a deep breath, and stepped inside, the warmth of the gallery enveloping him like a comforting embrace. Inside, the walls were adorned with vibrant colors and intricate patterns, each piece a testament to Margaret's rediscovered passion for art. Attendees mingled, their voices a soft hum against the backdrop of whispered admiration for the artwork. Ethan scanned the room, his eyes landing on a particularly striking mural, a swirl of blues and yellows that seemed to dance across the canvas. It was unmistakably her work. It spoke of pain, rebirth, and resilience. As he moved through the crowd, Ethan felt a mix of pride and envy. How could she have transformed her life so dramatically while he felt himself spiraling deeper into a chasm of regret? Business pressures loomed heavily over him, and the scandal that had rocked his company still reverberated in his mind. Yet, here was Margaret, radiant and alive, her spirit shining through each brushstroke. He couldn't help but wonder if he had pushed her to find the strength, or had he simply lost her forever. "Ethan," a voice broke through his reverie. It was Sarah, his business partner, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "You made it. I didn't know if you would come after everything." He plastered on a smile, though it felt heavy on his face. I had to see her work, he replied, gesturing towards the mural. She's incredible. Yeah, she really is, Sarah agreed, glancing at the piece. You know, this could be a great opportunity for you too. People are talking about her. Maybe a collaboration or a donation to her next project. Ethan shook his head. No, it's not about me. Not today. He turned his gaze back to the room, searching for Margaret. His heart raced as he spotted her across the gallery, surrounded by admirers. She was laughing, her hair catching the light, illuminating her face in a way he hadn't seen in years. The sight made him ache with longing and guilt. As the night wore on, Margaret moved with grace, accepting compliments and engaging with fellow artists and patrons. She was a far cry from the woman he had thrown out of his home. She exuded confidence, and it was intoxicating to watch. But Ethan's own insecurities loomed large. The weight of his actions pressed down on him like a shroud. The image of her frail and lost in the streets haunted him, and he felt a tumult of emotions as he stood at the edge of her world, afraid to step closer. Ethan, Margaret's voice rang out, cutting through the crowd. When their eyes met, a jolt surged through him, half joy, half dread. She approached, her expression unreadable, but there was a fire behind her gaze. You came. I had to, he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm proud of you, Mom. Your work is amazing. Margaret's lips tightened into a thin line, and for a moment, Ethan feared she would turn away. Instead, she said coolly, thank you. That means a lot coming from you. Her tone was measured, yet he sensed the underlying tension. I didn't think you'd want to see me again after. She trailed off, the memories of their last encounter hanging between them like a dark cloud. I've had time to think, Ethan offered, trying to keep his voice steady. What I did, it was wrong. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I see now that I was just scared. He took a step closer, vulnerability etched into his features. I want to make it right. Margaret shook her head slowly. You can't just walk back into my life and expect everything to be okay. You hurt me, Ethan. You threw me out like I was trash. Her voice was calm, but the hurt was palpable. You have no idea what those streets are like. His heart sank. I know I can't undo the past, but I want to understand. I want to be here for you now. A brief flicker of hope crossed her face, but it was quickly replaced by skepticism. You think you can just show up after all this time and be the supportive son? It doesn't work that way. She crossed her arms, her defenses up, and he felt the chasm between them widen. I know it doesn't, he replied, desperation creeping into his tone. But I'm trying. Can't we at least talk? I want to hear about your journey, what you've been doing. Margaret hesitated, glancing around the gallery at the people who admired her work. This is my moment, Ethan. I've worked hard to get here, and I won't let you ruin it. Her voice was firm, but he could hear the quiver beneath her words, a hint of her vulnerability. I wouldn't dream of ruining it, he said, his voice softer now. I just want a chance to be part of your life again, to support you in a way I never did before. He gestured towards the crowd. Look how far you've come. You're an inspiration. Inspiration, she echoed, her brow furrowing. You think I'm an inspiration because I learned to survive on the streets? Because I found refuge in art? Her voice rose slightly, betraying her anger. You don't get to turn my pain into some feel-good story. Ethan took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words. I didn't mean it like that. I see you thriving now, and I want to be part of that. I want to help you, not hinder you. Margaret's expression softened for a fleeting moment, but she quickly masked it with a steely resolve. Help? By what? Throwing money at my problems? That's not what I need from you. She stepped back, creating distance between them, her eyes flashing with defiance. I've learned to rely on myself. I know you have, Ethan replied, frustration creeping into his voice. But I'm here now. Can't you at least give me a chance to prove I've changed? Prove it, she shot back, her voice sharp. How can you prove anything when you've spent years shutting me out? You want to support me? Start by acknowledging the pain you caused. It's not just about your guilt, Ethan. It's about the consequences of your actions. As the words hung in the air, Ethan felt a wave of helplessness wash over him. He had come here with the hope of mending their relationship, yet he found himself at a crossroads, facing the very real fallout of his past decisions. "I can't change what happened," he admitted, his voice trembling with emotion. "But I want to understand it. I want to understand you." Margaret's expression softened, just for a moment, before she turned away, her gaze drifting to the admiring crowd. "I don't know if I can forgive you," she said quietly, almost as if speaking to herself. "Not yet." Ethan's heart sank as he watched her retreat into the safety of her new world. The night, once filled with hope, now felt heavy with regret. He stood frozen, watching Margaret bask in the warmth of her newfound life, wondering if he had truly lost her for good. The gallery buzzed around him, but all he could hear was the echo of her words, pain, consequences, and the deep chasm of their estrangement. As the evening progressed and the crowd continued to celebrate her accomplishments, Ethan felt the weight of his solitude. He had come seeking reconciliation, but instead, he was left grappling with the reality of the distance between them. Perhaps some wounds were too deep to heal in a single night, and perhaps the path to redemption was longer than he had anticipated. As the gallery opening began to wind down, Margaret felt a surge of emotions wash over her. The excitement of showcasing her work mingled with the remnants of pain from her past, particularly the unresolved tension with Ethan. Just as she was about to leave, her heart racing and her mind filled with thoughts of what lay ahead, a familiar yet unexpected figure emerged from the crowd. It was her old art mentor, Claudia, a woman who had guided her in her formative years, teaching her not only about technique but also about the spirit of art. "Margaret," Claudia called out, her voice warm and filled with enthusiasm. "I can't believe it's you. You look incredible." Margaret turned, her expression shifting from apprehension to joy. "Claudia, it's been so long. I didn't expect to see you here. I heard about this showcase and just had to come support you," Claudia replied, her eyes sparkling. "Your work is breathtaking, as always. I knew you'd find your way back to art." As they embraced, Claudia's gaze shifted toward the back of the gallery, where Ethan stood, a shadow of his former self. Margaret's heart sank momentarily as she recalled their last encounter, the harsh words exchanged. "Thank you," she said, drawing her attention back to Claudia. "It means a lot to me." "Margaret, there's something I need to talk to you about," Claudia said, her tone shifting. "I've been hearing some troubling things about your son." "Ethan?" Margaret asked, her brow furrowing. "What do you mean?" Claudia glanced around cautiously before leaning closer. "I've been in contact with some people from the industry, and they mentioned that Ethan's business practices are not as ethical as they seem. There are whispers of fraud, of him cutting corners." "Serious, Margaret. He could really be in trouble." Margaret felt a chill run down her spine. The thought of Ethan, her own son, being involved in something so scandalous was both alarming and disheartening. Why would he do something like that? He seemed so successful. Success can lead people down dark paths if they aren't careful. You know that. Sometimes, the pressure to maintain a facade can make someone lose sight of their values. Claudia replied, her voice steady yet compassionate. Margaret took a step back, processing this information. The anger and resentment she had felt toward Ethan began to mix with a sense of concern. She had spent so many years battling her own demons. The idea of her son facing a similar fate was unbearable. "What should I do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Confront him," Claudia suggested firmly. "You've come so far, Margaret. You are stronger than you realize. If he's in this deep, he needs someone to hold him accountable. You might be just the person to do it." Margaret's heart raced. Claudia's words resonated with the fire she had ignited within herself since leaving the streets. It was time to stand up not only for herself but for Ethan too. She nodded slowly. "You're right. I'll talk to him." With newfound determination, Margaret made her way through the crowd toward Ethan. He was still standing at the back, his expression a mixture of pride and apprehension as he watched her. She could see the weight of the world on his shoulders, and despite everything, her heart ached for him. "Ethan," she called, her voice cutting through the chatter of the gallery. He turned, surprise etched across his face as he saw her approaching. "Margaret," he said, his tone cautious. "I didn't expect you to come over." "I need to talk to you," she stated, her voice steady. "It's important." Ethan glanced around, ensuring the gallery was still buzzing with activity before nodding. "Okay, let's find somewhere private." They stepped out onto the balcony, overlooking the city lights. The view was breathtaking, but Margaret's focus was solely on Ethan. The air was thick with unspoken words, and she could feel the tension between them. "Claudia told me about some things happening with your business," she began, her heart pounding. "I know you've been under a lot of pressure. But Ethan, if what she said is true..." "Claudia talks too much," Ethan interrupted, his tone defensive. "You don't know anything about what's really going on." "Then enlighten me," Margaret insisted, "because right now it sounds like you're in over your head. I'm not here to judge you, but I care about you. I don't want to see you fall apart like I did." Ethan's expression shifted, a flicker of vulnerability breaking through his bravado. "You think I don't care? You think I wanted things to turn out this way? I was trying to protect us." "Protect you? By pushing me away? By hiding behind lies?" Margaret's voice rose, reflecting her frustration. "I spent years hiding from my own problems. I can't let you do the same. And if you're making choices that could ruin you, you need someone to hold you accountable." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. "What do you want from me, Margaret? I thought you wanted nothing to do with me after the way I treated you. I want you to be honest with yourself. With me. You need to confront whatever it is that's driving you to these unethical choices. This isn't about me anymore. It's about you facing the truth." The silence that followed was deafening. Margaret watched him, searching for a flicker of recognition in his eyes. Finally, Ethan looked away, the weight of her words sinking in. "I didn't want you to see me like this. I thought I was doing what was best for us, to make something of myself. And what about the price you're willing to pay? Is it worth losing everything, including your own integrity?" Margaret challenged, her heart racing with the intensity of the moment. Ethan's shoulders slumped as he gazed out at the city, his expression a mixture of regret and confusion. "I don't know anymore. I thought I had it all figured out. Maybe it's time to reevaluate what having it all really means," Margaret said softly. "You're not alone in this. I'm here for you, even after everything." As the weight of their history hung in the air, Margaret stood her ground, resolute in her commitment to herself and to her son. The years of pain and betrayal didn't define their relationship. They were just chapters in a longer story. "Ethan, I don't want to manipulate you anymore," she continued, her voice steady. "I want us to be honest with each other. I want to help you, but you have to be willing to face your mistakes." For a moment, Ethan remained silent, the city lights twinkling beneath them like distant stars. Finally, he looked back at her, vulnerability spilling from his eyes. "I'm scared, Margaret. I'm scared of losing everything I've built. But I'm also terrified of becoming like you." Margaret's heart ached at his words. "You won't become like me. You are stronger than that. You've shown strength in your career. Now you need that same strength to confront your truth." Ethan nodded slowly, the realization of his actions dawning on him. If what Claudia said is true, he paused, the weight of the truth pressing down on him. "I need to do something about it." Margaret stepped closer, her heart swelling with hope. "Then let's do it together. You don't have to face this alone." As they stood together, the distance between them began to dissolve. Margaret felt a sense of empowerment, not just for herself but for Ethan as well. She was no longer the broken woman lost in addiction. She was a force of resilience, ready to embrace her future. "Thank you, Mom," Ethan said, tears welling in his eyes. "I didn't think I could ever say that again." With a sense of closure and newfound strength, Margaret took a step back, ready to walk away. "I'm proud of you, Ethan. Just remember, the only way to truly move forward is to face the truth." As she turned to leave, her heart felt lighter than it had in years. She was ready to embrace her future, free from the shadows of her past. And she hoped Ethan would find his way too. With each step she took away from the gallery, She felt the chains of their troubled history breaking, leaving room for something beautiful to blossom in its place. If you like the content, don't forget to leave a like, a comment, and share it with your friends. Your comment is essential for the growth of the channel. And look at this video that appears on the screen. See you soon.